alarms about the risk of terrorism from illegal border crossing.
Deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing, except for trying to put on a show
about the risk of terrorism from illegal border cross.
The Apprentice, or whatever you want to call him. The day after, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. If the gentleman would like to respond to any of that.
Whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCU. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy.
We've seen all the stats that he's given to the committee on how much better they're doing at getting the bad guys than the previous guy was doing. With that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I think you're witnessing some auditions, clickbait auditions for the Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues. We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. But bond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display.
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history.
We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. But do you care before I launch into my line of questioning to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate?
Thank you, Director, for that, and we appreciate your service. We appreciate the results speak for themselves, I think, pretty plainly, and your commitment not only to results but to transparency, so we do appreciate that. Director, who was John Durham?
He was a former federal prosecutor, United States attorney, and ultimately appointed special counsel in the first Trump administration.
Correct, and what there was a document that he released in his findings called the Durham Report. What was the Durham and what were the findings, very briefly?
It was every special counsel that's appointed produces a report to the Attorney General. Special counsel's Durham report, and included extensive summaries in classified and unclassified manner, and we released the classified version, finally declassifying it for the American public in this committee.
Correct, and you released that in July of this year.
I think so.
Yes, sir.
Your
isn't
service,
it true that
we appreciate the results speak for themselves. I think
Durham
pretty plainly
Annex,
in your commitment not only to
that
results
in 2016,
but to transparency.
the Obama administration
so we do
obtained
appreciate
intelligence
that. Director,
information
who was John
from a
Durham?
source
He was
contained in two separate memoranda, one in January of 2016 and one in March. Confidential conversations between DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz and two individuals from the Soros Open Society Foundation. Isn't that true?
As written in the report, I'll let it speak for itself.
In the Durham Annex in January of 2016, the memorandum noted in part that President Barack Obama intended to scuttle the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server and mishandling of highly classified information.
As written in the
Durham found in the report?
I believe so.
Isn't it also found in the report that in March of 2016, the memorandum also included references to the same Obama effort to shut down the Clinton investigation, but additionally outlined a plan to falsely connect Trump to Russia? Isn't that in the Durham Annex?
I think it's in more than the Durham report, but yes.
The memo also stated in part that, quote, the Democrat Party's opposition is focused on discrediting Trump, among other things, the Clinton staff with the support from Special Services is preparing scandalous revelations of business connections between Trump and the Russian mafia. Isn't that also found in the now unclassified Durham Annex?
I believe so.
Isn't it also found in the
According to
report
the Durham
that in March of
Annex,
2016, the memorandum also included references to the same Obama effort to shut down the Clinton investigation plan to falsely connect Trump to Russia? Isn't that in the Durham Annex? I think it's in more than the Durham report. But yes, the memo also stated in part that the Democrat Party's opposition
when the Obama
was
administration
focused on discrediting
received
Trump, among
intelligence
other
in March of
things.
2018, Fusion GPS was preparing open source opposition research regarding purported ties between. The research was paid by the Clintons campaign and the DNC. Isn't that open source and also in the Durham Annex?
I believe both.
Okay. And so also in the Durham Annex, which I found interesting, was the potential campaign plan was shared with high-ranking career officials at DOJ. Isn't that in the Durham Annex?
I believe so, sir.
The Durham Annex describes that in July of 2016, emails allegedly between Leonard Bernardo, senior vice president of George Soros' Open Society Foundation, included data providing specifics against a political campaign.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The
I have UCs.
gentlelady from Texas recognized for unanimous consent.
Yes. First one is Russia's ghostwriter
One state
hacker
political
group takes
campaign.
aim at German election. This is from Politico.
Objection.
The next one is Director of National Intelligence, 30 days until election 2024, which specifically states that our assessments about activities and goals of Russia, Iran, and China are unchanged from earlier election security updates, and that they were meddling.
Objection.
And I've got three more. The last three are that how Russia is using artificial intelligence to interfere in elections. Moscow's attempts in U.S. and other elections are nothing new, though their tactics and strategy are constantly evolving. The next one is Russian interference coming
This is
soon
from
to
Politico.
EU. Russia pursues
The next
a
one is
systemic
Director of
strategy
National
of undermining
Intelligence, 30 days
elections and
until
influencing
election
public opinion
2024,
in
which
the West,
specifically states
EU,
that our
and NATO
assessments about
countries
activities
must
and
recognize
goals of
that
Russia,
Moscow
Iran, and
often
China are
acts
unchanged
through
from earlier
agents within
election
their own
security
borders and
updates,
build
and that they were meddling.
resilience
And I've got three
to
more. The
such
last three are
interference.
What's the source?
This one is CarnegieEndowment.org.
Okay, without objection.
Thank you.
The gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad that I'm going a little out of order here because I'm going to pursue some of the things that you were just talking to Mr. Fry about and remind
This
you
one is
about your
CarnegieEndowment.org.
confirmation hearing.
Okay, without objection.
At
Thank
your
you.
confirmation hearing in January, you said under oath, and I quote, "There will be organization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions take FBI should I be confirmed." And in your written response to the Senate questionnaire, you said, I quote, "Personnel decisions shall be based on performance and adherence to the law. And every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard, and no one will be terminated for case assignments." So I want to just go through a couple scenarios with you to get a sense of whether you think these are examples of politicization of the FBI
January,
or
he
making
said under oath,
decisions
and I quote,
based on
"There
the
will be no
performance
politicization
and
at the
adherence
FBI.
to
There
the
will be no retributive actions
So,
taken by
first
the FBI should I be
Would
confirmed." And
hiring
in your written
FBI
response to the
agents,
Senate
analysts,
questionnaire,
and
you
supervisors
said, I quote,
from
"Personnel
only
decisions shall
one
be based
political
on
party
performance and
being
adherence to the law." Every
politicization of the
FBI
FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
We don't ask FBI people, applicants, where their political parties are.
Mr. Patel, do you ask FBI applicants who they voted for?
The FBI does not.
Are you aware that in the lawsuit that Mr. Driscoll filed against
Making
you
personnel
and the
decisions
FBI,
based on
he
performance
was
and
asked
adherence
who
to the
he
law.
voted
We don't
for?
ask FBI people
Since that
applicants where
lawsuit
their
has been
political
filed,
parties
there's
are.
ongoing litigation. I'm not able to comment.
Well, but it also means that you just said that what happened in his situation didn't happen. So we will go on to the next question.
Okay.
Let me ask you an even easier one. Does firing agents for working on the cases that they were assigned to and that the is that politicization of the
Well,
FBI
but it
or
also
making
means that you
personnel
just said that what
decisions
happened is the
based on
situation,
performance
and so we will go on to the next.
The FBI doesn't terminate anyone based on case assignments alone.
Has the FBI ever been sued by somebody who felt that they were terminated based on case assignments?
In the entire history of the FBI, I'm sure they have.
No, since your tenure.
I'm sure there's ongoing litigation.
Yes. In fact, there is ongoing litigation. And in fact, people have been asked who they voted for. And in fact, you are running an FBI for the President of the United States rather than the people of the United States, because my questions were not hypotheticals. They are the things you have done during your tenure. And according to a lawsuit filed last week by long-term FBI agents, you fired former acting director Brian Driscoll, who had served with the Bureau for nearly 20 years, earned a Medal of Honor, Medal of Valor for bravery during the dangerous ISIS raid, and had a wealth of crisis response experience, and led the FBI's critical incident response. When the Trump administrations interviewed Mr. Driscoll for that role, they interrogated him about his political leanings and who he voted for in the last 5 elections. Questions Mr. Driscoll refused to answer because those types of questions impermissibly politicized the FBI. You also fired Steve Jensen, who served for nearly 2 ran critical terrorism, counterintelligence, and organized crime operations, whom you once described as embodying what the American public demands of the FBI. But he was fired because he took part in investigating crimes committed on January 6th.
When
and
the Trump
Trump's MAGA base lambasted you online for keeping him at the FBI.
About his political
so he's no longer
and who he voted
at
for
the
in the
FBI.
last 5 elections.
You also
Questions
fired
Mr.
a decorated
Driscoll
combat
refused
friend
because
with
those
decades
types
of experience in the Bureau,
politicized
Special
the
Agent
FBI. You
Walter
also fired Steve Jetson, who
Jardia,
served the FBI for nearly 2
because
decades
he worked
and
on the
ran critical
investigation
terrorism.
into the Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and helped investigate Trump's ally, Peter Navarro. Director Petlier, that you have flunked your own test. You put saving your job, which I actually believe you were being honest about during your confirmation hearings, over doing what's right for the FBI and the American people. That is not adherence to the law. Thank you, and I yield back.
Time of the gentlelady is expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, it's great to have this opportunity. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. And I've got to say, one of the most disheartening components of the previous administration, when I was working with local law enforcement all over the state of North Carolina, all over the country, fully did not really care about the inner workings
it is very clear
of
it was flunked to
Washington,
our
D.C.
test. You put saving
The
your job,
FBI
which I
had
actually believe you were being
previously
honest
been
about during your
the
confirmation
sterling,
hearings, over doing
the
what's right for
top-of-the-top
the
law
FBI
enforcement
and the
agency.
American
They wanted
people. That is not
their
adherence to the law.
FBI
Thank
to
you.
fight
And I
crime.
yield back.
Whatever small town, city, whatever it may be, FBI was expected to deliver for the American people. And then reports started to come out, in addition to the likes of McCabe, Comey, Clapper, Strzok, Page, that the FBI was targeting parents for protesting radical gender theory at their schools. They targeted Catholics, churches, pro-life organizations. And the FBI was really bruised in just modern-day America. And your focus on getting the FBI back to
So I have them on my
streets, fighting criminals, up bad guys, whether they're violent criminals, whether they're sex predators, whatever they may be, that is restoring the reputation
Whatever
of
it
the
may
FBI,
be,
and I thank you.
FBI was expected to deliver for the American
regards
people,
to
and then
the
reports
perceptions,
started
I
to
want to
come
be very
out.
clear
In
here.
addition to the likes of McCabe,
You mentioned the
Kamal,
statistics
Clapper,
about
Strzok,
removing
Page, that
dangerous
the FBI was
illegals,
targeting
removing
Christian
thousands
nuns.
of kilograms
They were
of
targeting
drugs,
parents for
violent criminals,
protesting.
guns.
Radicals
The
didn't
border
fear
is
their
secure.
schools.
These
They targeted
accomplishments are
Catholics,
noteworthy,
churches,
and they're
pro-life
needed.
organizations. And the
But at
FBI
the
was
same
really
token,
bruised in
I
just
want your
modern-day
take.
America.
The fight
We
is
won't
not
focus
over.
on getting
Isn't
the
that
FBI.
correct? When we look at what happened in the previous administration, the number of illegal alien criminals that made their way into this country of every type, they're embedded, they're here, and it's going to take a sustained effort to win this battle.
That's the critical component, sustained effort. And that's the critical component when you look up in Washington, D.C. We're not here for 4 seconds in terms of safeguarding Washington, D.C.
Yep.
It's a sustained initiative. We're taking it to Memphis and wherever we decide else. And so we are going to continue the mission till it's done.
In regards to offloading some of the agents from Washington, D.C. to the states, to the people, can you just explain how tactically that is a force multiplier in the law enforcement community around the country?
It's pretty simple. You don't even have to be in law enforcement to know that. If you put with other cops, they're going to do cop work. And
The
what
previous
was needed in
administration,
the
the
communities
number of
out
illegal
there was
alien
more
criminals
cops.
that made their
What
way
was
into
not
this country
needed
of
in
every
bloated
type,
bureaucracy
they're
in
embedded,
Washington,
they're
D.C.
here, and
was
it's
a
going
third of
to
the
take a
FBI's
sustained effort
workforce,
to win
because
this
a third of the
battle.
crime does not happen
That's the
in the
critical
Washington, D.C.
component,
NCR
sustained
area.
effort,
And
and
so
that's
the
the
results
critical
speak for
component.
themselves.
When you
Our
look at what
state and
happened
local
in
partners, I've
Washington,
always
D.C.,
said
we're
this,
not here for 4
are our
seconds in
biggest
terms of
ally,
safeguarding
our
Washington.
greatest
D.C.,
ally
it's a
and
sustained
partner.
initiative.
We cannot
We're
do the
taking
work
it
without
into
them.
Memphis, and
We gotta
wherever we
send our
decide
guys to
else.
them.
And so
That's
we
right.
are going to
And
continue
in
the
regards
mission.
to the last 4 years, the open border policies, whether it's terrorism, drug trafficking, human trafficking, violent crime, massive amounts of organized retail theft, and other types of criminal behavior, can you describe, just so anyone who's listening can talk about, how serious the levels of criminality have become in the United States?
Well, unfortunately, in order to have these record-breaking numbers of arrests and seizures, you tragically had to have a record-breaking explosion in violent crime, and it doesn't happen overnight. And it came in from all corners of the earth and from all platforms, including social media. And that's the root cause of all of these evils and in overnight. But the men and women of the FBI, what they did in these 7 months, everybody should be talking about
Open
it.
border
Every single
policies,
district in this
whether it's terrorism,
dais
drug
is safer
trafficking,
now, today,
human
than it
trafficking,
has ever been
violent
because
crime,
of that work.
massive amounts of
In regards
organized retail
to
theft,
the
and
ongoing
other types
political
of
climate,
criminal
Director
behavior.
Patel,
Can you describe
how
just
do
so anyone
sanctuary
who's living
policies
here
that
can
are
talk
still
about
being
how
implemented and
serious the
defended
levels of
in certain
criminality have
states,
become in the
cities, and
United
counties,
States?
how do they
Well,
help or hurt
unfortunately,
your
in
efforts
order
to
to
make
have
America
these
safer?
record-breaking
If
numbers
you're
of arrests and
harboring
seizures, you
criminals,
tragically
you're
had to have a
harboring
record-breaking
our
explosion.
communities safe. It's that simple. If you have a fugitive warrant for a violent felony offense and we are not able to procure you because of policies or rules that don't allow us to go get them, and time again, we have heard all too many illegal immigrants who should not have been here murdering women, murdering children, giving drugs to our youth, and raping our children, and that is unacceptable.
Straightly put, can you separate immigration enforcement with fighting crime?
They're intertwined.
Thank you. In regard to cashless bail, how does that help or hurt your efforts?
Criminals know that there are certain jurisdictions where if they shoot someone, they'll be out the door within the next hour to do it again. And that's an ethos that is, and a system that has been built out over years that we are combating.
How is
It's
defunding
that
the
simple.
police around
If you
the
have a
country, how does
fugitive
that
warrant
help
for
or
a
hurt?
violent felony offense, and we are
As long
not
as I'm
able
in
to
this seat,
procure
we're
you
not
because of
defunding any
policies
cops.
or rules that don't allow.
I yield back.
And
Gentleman
time
yields
and time
back.
again,
Mr.
we have
Garcia is
heard all too
recognized.
many
Thank
illegal
you,
immigrants who should
Chairman
not have
Jordan,
been here
and
murdering women,
welcome,
murdering
again,
children, giving
Director
drugs to
Patel.
our youth,
As
and
members
raping
of
our
the
children. And
Judiciary
that is
Committee, we have a
unacceptable. Rightly
responsibility
put,
to
can you
conduct
separate
oversight
immigration
of the
enforcement
FBI
with
and
fighting crime?
assess
Thank
whether
you.
or not you're doing a good job in a responsible and impartial manner, or whether you're just a henchman for Donald Trump who's weaponizing the Bureau at the expense of public safety. As Congressman tenure is the Bureau's expanded role in low-level, non-criminal immigration enforcement. I have a report here from the conservative Cato Institute. They've obtained ICE documents showing that over 2,500 FBI personnel are now working on immigration enforcement. A yes or no question. Did you sign off on this? 2,500
2,500 FBI employees are not currently working on immigration enforcement.
Did you sign off
A
on
job
this?
that is responsible if
On
it's
the
not in
Cato
all manner,
report?
or whether it's just a
On the
henchman. Donald Trump
2,500
weaponizing the Bureau at the extent of
personnel,
public safety.
FBI
As
personnel that
Congressman
have been
Virginia
reported
is
to
the
now
Bureau's
be
expandable
working.
in immigration
Couldn't have
enforcement.
signed off on
I
it
have
'cause
a
it's not
report here
happening.
from the conservative Cato Institute. They have a paid ICE
You
document
can
showing
call
that
it
over
whatever
2,500.
you want, but the reality is that over 2,000 personnel individuals are now working at ICE instead of their jobs. I want to follow up on something that Senator Durbin asked you about yesterday. This article from MSNBC reports that nearly every agent on Baltimore's domestic terrorism unit, who was, by the way, investigating the 764 network of child predators, was diverted to work on immigration enforcement full-time. That forced them to, and I quote him, walk away from investigations of a network of violent predators that targets and exploits children online. Yes
The
or
reality
no?
is that
Are
over
you
2,000
aware that this
personnel
happened?
individuals are now
And
working at
did you
ICE
sign off
instead
on
of their
it?
jobs. I want to
Premise
follow
is
up on
false.
something that Senator Durbin asked
764
you
network
about
in Baltimore
yesterday.
was taken down.
This article
An
from
FBI
MSN,
duty
every
all the
agent
time.
on
I'm
Baltimore's
reclaiming my
domestic
time.
terrorism
You
unit,
told
who
Senator
was, by the
Durbin
way,
yesterday you
investigating
didn't
the
know about it, so
764
your
network of
testimony
child.
is inconsistent today.
No, I found
Final
out.
question. Let me ask you, again, a yes or no question. Are you aware that agents have been told by supervisors not to documenting their shifting of resources toward immigration-related work?
It's another falsehood. It's impossible to remove a human being without documenting that work.
As FBI director, you must be transparent. Now, the
Documenting their
stated
shifting of
mission of
resources
the
toward
FBI,
immigration-related
keeping
work. It's a
our
literal another
communities
falsehood. It's
safe.
impossible to
Diverting
remove a human
FBI
being without
agents from
documenting their
investigating
work.
violent child predators doesn't make us safer. Using FBI resources to target parents, children, and other immigrants for low-level, non-criminal enforcement doesn't make us safer. Enabling violent, lawless conduct by federal enforcement doesn't make us safer. As we saw last week when an ICE officer killed one of my constituents. And I know that the FBI has been involved in that investigation. And yesterday, ICE did a raid in the suburb of Elgin where 2 U.S. citizens were arrested, and who accompanied them on that filming of that show? Secretary Nunn. Shameful conduct. And weaponizing the FBI to
Child
serve
predators
Donald
doesn't
Trump's
make us
political
safer.
agenda
Using
instead
FBI
of
rape
not
children
make us
and other
safer.
immigrants for low-level,
Before I yield back,
non-criminal
Mr.
enforcement
Chairman,
doesn't
I
make us
request
safer.
unanimous
Enabling
consent
violent, lawless
to submit
conduct
the
by
following
federal
documents
enforcement
for
doesn't
the
make us
record.
safer, as
A
we saw
report
last week
from the
when an
Cato
ICE officer
Institute,
killed
which I
one of my
referenced
constituents.
earlier,
And I know that the
where
FBI
ICE has
been involved in
diverted
that.
over 2,500 officers from their jobs. And two, an article from MSNBC titled, Trump's Deportations Divert FBI Agents Off Child Predator Cases, and an article from CNN entitled, White House Pressure for Increased Immigration Arrests Strains Law Enforcement Agencies. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without Johnson, recognized.
Thank you, and thank you, by the way, for coming over here. Sorry you have to put up with all this. I know when you took over, the FBI's reputation in a lot of circles perhaps had never been lower. I mean, part of that is brazen involvement in political activity, the Foreign Influence Task Force, getting involved and trying to suppress
officers
news
from their jobs,
stories
and
in the
two,
New York
an article
Post,
from MSNBC
crossfire
titled Trump's
hurricanes with bogus
FBI
stories
agents
to try to
off child
keep
predator
the
cases,
2016
and an article from
election,
CNN titled White House
FBI
Pressure for Increased
downplaying
Immigration
stories.
Arrests Strains Law Enforcement Agencies. Thank you,
Of
and I
Hillary
yield back.
Clinton's
I yield back.
emails
I yield
and
back.
things
I
in the
yield back.
election.
I yield back. I yield back. I yield back. I yield back.
I think a strong anti-religious bias. We talked about stories of an anti-Catholic bias in there. I know I've talked to people about horrific overreaction at the big Hindu temple in New Jersey, in which, just so people understand, you had a rectory in kind of in the temple area. The religious leaders, taken out at gunpoint. big problems. And I think finally the FBI trying to turn America's viewpoint on certain political issues. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about what was done in Mexico with regard to shipping weapons.
Anti-religious bias.
Shipping weapons into Mexico.
We talked about stories and anti-Catholic bias, and I know I've talked to people about horrific overreaction at the Big Hindu temple in New Jersey,
what scares me
so
is,
people understand,
and
you
all
got a
these
ritual in
horrible
the
things that
temple
were done in
area.
our past,
The religious leaders, you know, take out at
individual
gunpoint. Big
FBI
programs. And I
agents who
think finally,
participated in them, in which apparently their supervisors told them this is okay, or even admirable. And what I'm going to ask you, are you able to do anything to make sure that in the future these corrupted FBI agents understand the importance of religion in our life, and they're not to view it with suspicion? They understand parental rights and the idea that traditionally in America, parents have the ability to object when their young 5 or 6-year-old children or year-old or very young children are getting what most people consider highly inappropriate sex. What are we doing there to try to make sure we don't have problems with these FBI agents again, or make sure that in the future administrations, they would object
which apparently their supervisors told us is okay, or even admirable. And what I'm going to ask you, are you able to do anything to make sure that in the future, these corrupted FBI agents understand the importance of religion in our life, and they're not to view with suspicion? They understand parental rights and the idea that traditionally in America, the ability to reject young 5 or 6.
And just to show the American public the resurrection that the FBI has had in these last 7 months, you don't have to believe me. Our applicant pool has doubled month over month every year from the highest point it has ever been. More people want to work at this FBI.
I'm sure that's because of you, and you're kind of anticipating my next question. I talk to retired FBI agents in my area who sometimes retired in part because they hated the woke, anti-conservative culture at the FBI. And they are concerned,
the resurrection that the FBI has had in these last 7 months. You don't have to believe me. Our applicant pool has doubled month over month every year from the highest point it has ever been. More people want to work at this FBI than ever before in U.S. history.
New agents. So I think you're answering my question. Do you feel you'll be able to a certain extent solve the problem of inappropriately woke agents filling up the past, because now you're going to have a larger pool to draw from?
Everybody that comes to work at the FBI is allowed to have their own belief system, but they're not allowed to bring that belief system into the workplace. And anyone that does won't work at the FBI.
Okay, very good. Now, recently, there's sort of another potential scandal, I guess, a politically motivated thing, Arctic frost. Do you want to comment on that? And it appears one
Answer
more
my
time
question.
as perhaps the FBI was getting
Do you
involved
feel you'll be able to ascertain
normally
and
be
solve the
considered
problem of inappropriately
political,
woke agents filling up the agency in the past, because now you're going to have a larger pool
We
to
are
draw
not
from?
getting involved in political events.
And final thing, with regard to prejudice against what happened in the big Hindu temple there in New Jersey, do you think, have you ever, has anybody ever apologized to the Catholic Church or apologized to that temple?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. Is that something you think would be perhaps a good idea to do in the future?
I think leadership should address it.
Thank you.
Gentleman, time has expired. Gentleman yields back the. So we got the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Patel, for your endurance and your perseverance throughout today's hearing,
regard to our judges
and for
and
all
gentlemen,
you've shared.
that
First
looks
of all,
to
let me
happen
start
in
by
a big,
saying that I was
real-time
very
player
grateful
in
and
New
glad to
Jersey.
see
Do you
that
think
the
that you ever,
FBI
has they ever
has
apologized
joined the
to the Catholic
investigation of the
Church,
tragic and
apologized
brutal
to that
murder
temple?
of
I don't know,
Irina
sir.
Zarutska
Is that
in
something you
Charlotte,
think would
which
be
is
perhaps
just
a
right
good
by my
idea to do in the
district.
future?
This
I think
woman, as you
leadership
know,
should
fled
address
the
it.
war in
Thank you.
Ukraine only to be killed in cold blood by a man who had no business being on the streets whatsoever. This man, who had been seen stabbing Irina to death on video, had been arrested 14 previous times, served prison time, and was diagnosed with a severe mental illness. In response to the previous offense, the magistrate over his case released him to roam the streets with a $0 bond and a simple written promise to appear in court. Mr. Patel, let me just ask, should judges apply the most lenient bail standards to people with extensive criminal history?
Do they apply the most lenient?
Yeah, should they apply the most bail standards to people with extensive criminal history?
That has not been my experience. That should not happen.
Is America a place where young women should fear to ride public transit?
No.
And was Irina
Led by a
Zaruchka's
man who
death,
had no
would you
business
say,
being on the
possibly the
streets
result
whatsoever.
of
This man who had
Democrats'
been seen stabbing
pro-crime
Irina to
policies?
death on video
That
had been arrested
investigation
14
and,
previous times. So
matter
prison
is
time, was
in open
diagnosed
trial,
with
so
a
I don't wanna
severe
stylize
mental
the
illness. In response to
I understand. Well, Mr. Patel, let me just say, taking over the FBI after the Biden administration weaponization of the agency is no easy feat, as we've recognized throughout this hearing today. For 4 years, we witnessed the Biden administration targeting regular Americans rather than violent criminals. For example, the Biden administration's FBI spent its time and resources going after churches and Christians. We know that the FBI used an undercover agent to collect information about a parishioner. We know that the FBI investigated and surveilled a Catholic priest. And all of this was in response to First Amendment property. Mr. Patel, I want to ask you, should the FBI use its resources to spy on Catholics?
Never.
So what does it say about the culture of the Biden FBI that law enforcement to go after Catholics, and some FBI employees were comfortable with taking such actions?
Pursuant to my transparency
For 4 years,
initiative
we
and
witnessed
working
the
with
Biden
Congress on
administration
oversight, those
targeting
documents,
regular
that's it.
Americans rather
Those
than
documents
violent
available for
criminals.
the
For
general
example,
public
the
to
Biden
see and
administration
read.
spent
That's
its
what I'm
time
committed
and
to.
resources
And so
going
have you
after
been able to
churches
hold
and
accountable
Christians. We
those
know that
at
the
the
FBI used
FBI
an
who went
undercover
after
agent to collect
law-abiding
information
Catholic church
about a
members?
parishioner.
If they
We
did
know that
so
the FBI
improperly,
investigated
yes.
and surveilled a Catholic.
Well,
This was in
36
response to
years,
First
and
Amendment
I've
protected
constantly stood up for
activity. Mr.
life
Patel,
and
I
stood
want
up for
to ask you,
family,
should the
amidst a
FBI
culture that's increasingly hostile to both of those things. And if the Biden administration targeted Catholics, could I have been targeted by the Ray FBI as well?
Well, I don't know, but I'm not going to target you.
Well, I know that President Trump respects religious liberty and that his administration is seeking to right the wrongs of the Biden administration. Securing our freedoms and protecting faith leaders and communities requires a multi-pronged approach. What would you say in just the last few moments, what is the FBI under your leadership doing to make sure that our religious liberty and religious leaders can rest comfortable this evening?
Zealously protecting our First Amendment rights, but zealously going after those that abuse that right that leads to criminal conduct. You will be investigated. You will be looked at.
Hostile to
referred
both of those things.
every
And
single
if the
time
Biden
evidence
administration targeted Catholics,
Thank you, sir. What,
leadership.
could you just speak to what the FBI is doing to bolster our community's cybersecurity to defend against any future cyber attacks?
Well, in North Carolina, you're slated to get a plus up of 22 FBI employees, and they're already on the way. And that encompasses cyber, counter intel, counterterrorism, field agents, intel operatives. And what we're doing on a macro level on the counterintelligence and cyber front is going after the people that fund these operations, these online platforms, and breaking their banks. Because once we do that successfully across the board, they won't have the ability to attack us.
Well, thank you, Director Patel, and let me comments to those of my colleagues that are very grateful for your leadership, grateful for your courage, your consistency, and for being willing to stand in the gap for us. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Director Patel, thank you for being here with us
Bio
today.
is doing to bolster our
Over the past
community's
few years, we have
cybersecurity to
seen
defend
a
against any
disturbing
future cyber
increase in
attack.
attacks on Christians and conservatives.
Well,
Since the leak of the Dobbs
you're
decision,
slated to get a
there
plus
have
up of
been
22 FBI
354
employees, and
attacks
they're
on
already on the way,
Catholic
and that
churches.
encompasses
In the first year, there
cyber
were more than 100
counterterrorism,
attacks
field agents,
against
intel
pro-life
operatives,
pregnancy care
and what we're doing on a macro
And the
level on
shadowy
counterintelligence
pro-abortion
and cyber fruit is
group,
going after
Jane's
people to fund
Revenge,
these
claimed
operations on these
responsibility
online
for 2
platforms.
dozen of these attacks. Meanwhile, the Biden FBI focused resources on Catholics and peaceful pro-life protesters like Mark Houck and Paul Vaughn. Many of these attacks on Christians and conservatives were coordinated or praised by dark leftist cells who lurk on the online chat rooms of Reddit, Discord, and game sites. This is a war room for Antifa and violent transgender activists. There have been essentially no incidents of violence by Catholics, pro-lifers, or parents at school board meetings, but there have unfortunately been multiple shootings motivated under ideology, including recent attacks in Nashville, Colorado Springs, Denver, and Aberdeen. Worse, the targeted violence reached a boiling point this past month. A few weeks ago, an anti-Christian transgender terrorist murdered
Meanwhile,
2 children
the Biden
and
FBI
injured 17
focused resources on
in a
attacking
shooting at a
Catholics and
Catholic
peaceful
mass.
pro-life protesters
And
like
last
Mark
week,
Hawk
while
and
we
Paul
were sitting
Vaughn.
in this
Many of
committee
these
room
attacks
almost
on
to the
Christians
hour,
and
Charlie Kirk
conservatives
was
were coordinated
assassinated
or
by a
praised by dark
22-year-old
leftist cells
who
who
appears to
lurk
have
on
been
the
motivated
online
by
chat rooms of
leftist
Reddit,
and
Discord,
transgender
and game
ideology.
sites. This is
As
a
you
war room
confirmed,
for Antifa
yesterday
and violent
to
transgender
my Senate
activists.
colleagues,
There have
he
been
may not have
essentially no
acted
incidents
alone,
of
and
violence by
he testified
Catholics,
that in his online
pro-lifers, or
chat
parents.
room of 20 trans ideologues that you were aware, I believe you said many more, many were aware of and possibly complicit in the assassination. Director Patel, in light of the increased violence emanating from the far left, is your FBI investigating this violent trend of anti-religious, Antifa, and transgender-driven violence?
All of it across the board is being zealously investigated, no matter what your motivation or bias is behind it.
Very good. We've also noticed a dramatic surge of the number of clinics offering so-called gender-affirming care. Whistleblowers in a recent NIH study confirmed that these clinics prey on some of the most mentally ill children and young adults in our society.
20 trans ideologues that you are aware. I believe you said many more. Many were aware of and possibly complicit in the assassination. Director Patel, in light of the increased violence emanating from the far left, is your FBI investigating this violent trend of anti-religion, the Antifa, and transgender-driven violence? All of it across the board is being zealously investigated, no matter what your motivation.
Director Patel, is the FBI looking into the role that these gender clinics may have in the recent attacks in making these mentally ill individuals violent?
We're looking at the entire spider web for any of these attacks, be it Denver or Charlie or where have you. And that's why our investigations are ongoing. We don't have a final product yet.
One of my Democrat colleagues, as an aside, mentioned, quote, the federal takeover of our cities. And I don't know whether my Democrat colleagues, for some reason, liked Washington, D.C. better when it was more dangerous and more violent, when there were more robberies and carjackings and murders and rapes. But
is the FBI looking at the role that these gender clinics?
Very good. And I thank you so much for your testimony. I know it's been a long day, so I'll give you a little break and yield back the rest of my time.
Gentleman yield?
To me? Yes, yes.
Director Patel, what's a 302?
It's a report, the number of the report, whenever an FBI agent goes out and interviews someone.
And are you familiar with the 302 where the FBI agent interviewed the whistleblower who's come forward and talked about the former chair of the Intel Committee here in the House pushing staff members to leak classified information? Well, I'll just read from it. Staffers were instructed to use, this is from the 302.
3% reduction in homicides in Washington.
Staffers were instructed to use any sources that had
Thank you so much for your testimony. It's been a long day, so I'll give you a little break and yield back the rest of my time.
Which would then be made public to the media in order to compel
what's
public
302? It's a report, the number of the report.
Yeah, and that's how they played the game. Leaking information, classified or otherwise, true or otherwise, to create this public opinion to compel action to undermine the president.
I believe so.
Just one other point I would make from this. This witness also said in the 302 that the agent recorded that the witness provided the interviewing agents with copies of both his handwritten notes and an email. So he gave them the stuff he wrote, and at the actual time this was taking place. That's all in the 302, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit for the record an article from The Hill, Massive Crime Drop in D.C., City Sees Zero Murder Week, dated August 25th, 2025.
To create this public
and I'd
opinion
also
to
like
compel
to
action
for the
to
record an
undermine the
article from the New
president.
York
I would make
Times,
from this
dated
witness
April 18th,
also said in
2025.
302
Man who
that
set
the
fire
agent
on
reported that the
Shapiro's
witness provided
Manchester
copies of both his
police
handwritten notes and an
Without
email.
objection.
So he gave him the stuff he wrote and at the
Gentlelady
actual.
from Texas and then Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much. First you see is the FEIAA letter to Congress on summary terminations, where it states denying fundamental due process and summarily dismissing special agents will only make it harder to protect our nation. These actions distract agents from their work, foster fear that their assignments could cost them their careers, either now or under the administration, and increase the risk of criminal and national security threats by undermining unity and morale within the Bureau.
Without objection.
The next one is a CNN article. FBI agents are again pulled from their day jobs to address a Trump priority. It states, morale is the worst I've seen, said one law enforcement source. The Bureau is becoming unrecognizable. Lots of people are weighing
First, you see,
really
is the
difficult
FAA letter
decisions
to Congress
right now.
on summary terminations, where it states in process and summarily dismissing
Thank you,
special
Mr. Chair.
agents
I'd
will
request
only make it
unanimous
harder to
consent
protect our
introduced
nation.
into the record a September
These actions
16th,
distract agents from
2025
their work,
article in the New
foster fear
Republic.
that their assignments
Any president in American history, I imagine that brings you a lot of satisfaction and pride as director of America's foremost law enforcement agency. Recently, President Trump conducted very strategic and important strikes on Iran's nuclear apparatus in that country. We also know that there are concerns of significant Iranian sleeper terrorist cells here in the U.S., perhaps exacerbated by the open border during the Biden administration. What can you tell Congress and the American people about what the FBI is doing to safeguard us from potential terrorist attacks by Iranian cells?
So our counterterrorism division, which is fully stocked up, watches for reflections in the intelligence streams that our intelligence community collects and produces, and works hand in glove with our partners at the CIA and elsewhere to make sure that any threat, hearsay, triple hearsay, or totally incredible, is not only fully run down, but we also take our duties to notify and give defensive briefings to those who are mentioned in those intelligence reports to make sure that we do both our notification obligation and our investigatory obligation.
Thank you. The FBI is also the foremost counterintelligence apparatus here in the U.S. We know the U.S. faces a more complex threat of global array of global threats than any time perhaps World War II or even superseding that time. As America continues to be under attack from various intelligence agencies globally, what can you tell us about the counterintelligence operations of the FBI
to make sure that any threat, even if it's hearsay, double hearsay, triple hearsay, or totally incredible, is not only fully run down, but we also take our duties to notifying defensive briefings to those who are mentioned to make sure that we do.
Headquartered in Washington, but have far-reaching capabilities because we have to face against our adversaries in the DPRK, in Russia, China, Iran, and elsewhere. And in order to do that, we have to have dedicated intelligence professionals on those target sets. And since I become director, I've demanded not only a dismantling and disruption of networks, but a public display of how we're doing it so the world knows that our adversary is A, attacking us, and B, we're stopping them. And that's why you've seen these dramatic counterintelligence arrests in the PRC by 33%, in Russia 83%, in Iran 60%. We are showing the world that they are trying to engage in espionage activities against us, and we are holding them accountable publicly.
And there's been increasing concern about the Maduro regime of Venezuela.
We'll have far-reaching capabilities because we have to face
terrorist
against
activity,
our
criminal
adversaries
drug
in the
networks, and
DPRK,
potential
in Russia,
espionage
China, Iran,
entities here
and
within the
elsewhere.
U.S.
And
What
in
can you
order
tell me
to do
about?
that,
Tell us
we
about
have
your
to have
activities
dedicated
regarding the Maduro
professionals
regime
on
in
those
Venezuela.
target sets. And since I became
Generally
director,
speaking,
I've demanded
one of the
not only a
largest,
dismantling and destruction of
points,
networks, but a public
shipment
display of
points for
how we're
narcotics out
doing
of South
it.
America,
So the world
Colombia,
knows that our
obviously,
adversary
and
is
also
A, attacking us,
Venezuela
and B,
is being
we're
utilized
stopping them.
heavily by
And
the
that's why you've seen these
narco-traffickers
dramatic
to
increases
send
in
up,
counter.
cocaine, meth, and fentanyl, and excuse me, all the other illegal narcotics through the island chains in the Caribbean Ocean and ultimately for America. So there has to be more work done in the region, navigable waterways from being traversed with drugs bound for America.
And finally, Mr. Director, what is